Good morning. Welcome to Sasakawa Peace Foundation USA Policy Briefing Series. I am Satohiro Akimoto, President and Chairman of Sasakawa Peace Foundation USA, or Sasakawa USA. I am delighted to see so many people attending this event. We have about 230 registrants, indicating a high level of interest in the US-Japan Space Cooperation, in addition to the quality of two esteemed speakers. Thank you very much for joining. Sasakawa USA is a nonpartisan 501c3 organization dedicated to deepening the understanding of and strengthening the ties between Japan and the United States, mainly in the Asia-Pacific context, for the good of free and open international community. Before we begin the event, let me quickly go over meeting protocol. Today's event is on the record. A recap and a video link will be posted on our website at a later date. How to change screen views? Please manually change between speaker views and the gallery views. How to ask questions? Please click on the raise hand button. Please unmute yourself when you're called upon. Today's topic is US-Japan cooperation in the space. There have been some exciting development for both the United States and Japan with regard to the space. The two countries were very excited to see the successful launch of SpaceX Crew Dragon last month. It was the first time in 9 years for the United States to launch a manned spacecraft from US soil since the Space Shuttle retired in 2011. Japan was equally excited to see a Japanese JAXA astronaut, Soichi Noguchi, on board. The US and Japan have agreed to have Japanese astronauts in the future SpaceX launches and joint work on the ISS. Japan also just successfully recovered a capsule dropped off by space probe Hayabusa 2. It is believed to carry precious samples collected from an asteroid called Ryugu, some 300 million kilometers away from Earth. Hayabusa 2, which was launched in 2014, has already begun another mission with leftover fuel. In addition to these recent developments, there is a huge macro issue of space as a new strategic and a national security domain. The strategic and the security competition in the space has become fierce in recent years. The US has established the Space Command. Japan has long considered the space in a different way and is now tackling this important issue. It is my distinct honor to introduce our two excellent speakers today. Minister Kimitake Nakamura has been involved in the US-Japan Space Cooperation for a long time. He played a major role in the US-Japan cooperation on space situational awareness regarding first ever data exchanges on space objects and debris between JAXA and the US Strategic Command. Minister Nakamura is also a scholar, having taught international law, including space law at the Waseda University and Chuo University. Even in Washington, in addition to his responsibility to cover the Congress, Minister Nakamura continued his academic work as a visiting scholar at the George Washington University's Space Policy Institute. Dr. Masami Onoda is the director of JAXA's Washington, DC office. She has spent most of her productive career at the JAXA on international affairs, satellite applications, and industry relations. She is one of the most international officers at the JAXA, having worked at Intergovernment Group on Earth Observations in Geneva and UN Office for Outer Space Affairs in Vienna. One thing I admire Ms. Onoda very much, or Dr. Onoda very much about is her interest in bringing up future generation of Japanese who are interested in the space. While Japan has a bevy of excellent astronauts, they are not in their 30s and 40s. Minister Nakamura, floor is yours. I'm sorry, I should introduce Ms. Onoda. Dr. Onoda, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Yes, President Akimoto, thank you for the kind introduction. It flatters and humbles me. My name is Masami Onoda. I'm the head of the Washington, D.C. office of the Japanese Aerospace Exploration Agency, JAXA. And it's a pleasure to be in front of this distinguished audience this morning, or late at night for those who are tuning in from Japan to join us for this very interesting discussion. I understand we have quite a big crowd in front of us. It surprises me to see that we had more than 200 registrants. I think maybe half of you are very familiar with space and know myself very well also. Hello to everybody. And some of you probably less so. So this morning I'm trying to give you a mix of an introduction into space and also it is my great pleasure of being able to address you together with Minister Nakamura. And I understand that my role would be to show you the very entrance into space, get you excited and ready for Nakamura-san's talk. So now I'd like to show you, ladies and gentlemen, to outer space. Buckle in and welcome aboard. Next slide. This is showing the video of the launch of the Crew 1 that Minister Akimoto just introduced in the introduction that carried JAXA astronaut Soichi Noguchi to the International Space Station. The video is showing the SpaceX very exciting live launch out from Cape Canaveral in Florida. Many of you must have tuned in to see the live video feed. Now, this Crew 1 mission was named Resilience, that carried 4 astronauts, Shannon Walker, Michael Glover, Victor Glover and Michael Hopkins, and the Japanese astronaut Soichi Noguchi to the International Space Station. The name Resilience, of course, I believe comes from the resilience that we are trying to show from just carrying on and moving forward in this very difficult times that we are all experiencing. And I think all of us in space always ask ourselves, in this difficult times, what is there that we can do for the society and for the humanity? And I think we strive to just step forward one step by step to show that we can still move forward and show people hope and the resilience of humanity. Thank you. Next slide, please. So these are showing the 4 astronauts here, and the one on the very right that you're seeing is Soichi Noguchi. He's wearing the cool SpaceX spacesuit. Looks a little bit like the stormtroopers, if you know what that is, to me. But I think that's really, really awesome that they're showing this kind of futuristic fashion even to us, and that to the right also in his blue suit, so-called, is Soichi Noguchi out of his spacesuit. And he is now with the other fellow astronauts on the space station, together with Hoshide, Akihiko Hoshide, who is next to him in his spacesuit when he was going up to space last time, I think. And Hoshide-san will be on what we will call Crew 2, the second of the operational Dragon human spaceflight to the ISS. And the ISS is an international partnership, and it has been up there with people for 20 years now, and there has been permanent human existence on the ISS all this time. Let me talk a little bit more about the International Space Station. The International Space Station, or the ISS, is a large spacecraft in orbit around Earth. The first piece of ISS was launched in November 1998. The ISS was launched in pieces or modules, nodes that are units consisting the ISS, for those who do not know. And each node is made by a partner to the ISS. What is a partner to the ISS? Those are countries, the US, Japan, Europe, and Russia. And the ISS has a volume, say, of a 5-bedroom house, or for those who have never been into a 5-bedroom house, a Boeing 747 aircraft, and it roughly covers the area of a football field. Serves as a home where crews live, and the space station is also a unique science laboratory. It orbits Earth at an altitude of approximately 250 miles, which is 400 kilometers, and orbits Earth every 90 minutes. The partners have gained valuable experience through the ISS about operating such a large space station and living and working in space for long terms. These lessons will make it possible to send humans sustainably to the moon, Mars, and farther into space than ever before. I wanted to give you a glimpse of another recent feat accomplished by Japan. Does anybody know what this photo is? It is Hayabusa 2, the spacecraft, actually capsule, because Hayabusa 2 is still in space and on its secondary journey to another asteroid. And it is containing samples, the capsule that you see here, like a shooting star. It's a fireball now because it's entering the atmosphere from space, streaking like a shooting star, and seeing, this is seen over the skies of Coober Pedy in South Australia, near a place called Woomera, where the capsule landed and was already safely recovered. NASA has launched a mission called OSIRIS-REx to another asteroid called Bennu. And JAXA and NASA plan to exchange samples once the OSIRIS-REx delivers their sample home to Earth, planned in 2023. Now on to Mars. The Martian Moon Exploration MMX mission, as shown here, is a project to explore the 2 moons of Mars, with a planned launch in Japanese fiscal year 2024. It will collect data and sample from the Martian moon, shown here is Phobos, and return to Earth in fiscal year 2029. So we are hoping to have this kind of sample return like every 10 years and keep working with NASA and other European partners to repeat this kind of adventures into space. Next slide, please. So pull our journey back a little bit now to Earth for a moment. Last year, as NASA Administrator Mr. Bridenstine visited Japan, JAXA and NASA signed a joint statement on collaboration in exploration. That's showing them smiling with the signed document. And a month later, the Prime Minister Abe of Japan at the time announced that Japan will join the International Exploration Plan to the Moon and the Gateway Program. This further developed this year to the Joint Exploration Declaration of Intent. It's a mouthful because we wanted to read JEDI, and then signed the Artemis Accords with other 7 countries this October. Which is the Artemis Accords is a common set of principles to govern civil exploration and use of outer space. So this shows all the countries' heads, principles signing the Artemis Accords. And of course, this was done virtually this year. So now you're probably going to ask, what exactly will Japan do in the International Space Exploration Program? Now that we've done all the signing and everything, here is an outline of what Japan is planning to contribute. For the very top part, showing a little space station-like spacecraft. And this is what is called the HALO and the PPE. Now I'm going to flood you with all this space jargon. I hope you can keep up with me, but I'll try to explain as much as I can. So the HALO is the Habitation Logistics Outpost. And this NASA plans to launch together with the Power Propulsion element, PPE, and those two will be launched together to consist the initial elements to the Lunar Orbiting Gateway, now planned to be launched by 2023. Japan is working to provide components to this, and further to the gateway that's on the right, it shows IHAB, the habitat, which is going to be primarily developed by the European Space Agency, and we are going to cooperate to provide some possibly life support systems and environmental control technology. And we also going one layer down using the HTV-X cargo transfer vehicle to supply cargo and fuel to Gateway. Thirdly, their own mission to the lunar surface contribute with observational data in preparation for future human landing on the moon. And then towards the end of this decade, we want to study the development of a pressurized lunar rover that can house and carry humans on the moon's surface. So this is all very exciting for us. The little astronauts, as you can see on the diagram, symbolize our hope to send astronauts, also Japanese astronauts, to the moon surface. Next slide, please. Japan is planning missions, as I just discussed. These are one of the elements we want to contribute as missions to the lunar surface. One is SLIM, a small and smart lander to be launched in fiscal year 2022, and a lunar polar exploration mission that will follow in cooperation with India. Next slide, please. And this is the rover that I just mentioned, a pressurized rover, meaning that people can live in there without wearing a space suit. And we are studying this with the company Toyota that you probably all know. Next, please. JAXA engages with the private sector in doing and developing all of these projects from traditional to entrepreneurial space industries, and work together to create and innovate space industry base to support these exploration programs. So also we want to bring various applications and benefits through the collaboration with these industries to Earth. Next slide, please. Just showing you examples of Japanese new space players, including space tourism and space avatar with the ANA and airline, and even a lot of companies were working together for possible development of space food in the future. Next slide, please. Finally, I want to touch upon how broad our international cooperation is. Through bilateral and multilateral cooperation, we cooperate with many countries around the world, including emerging space countries such as UAE and Australia, and many others. Of course, the United States is the closest and one of the most important partners in terms of the breadth and history of our cooperation from civil, commercial to national security. Next slide, please. So this is the last image that I wanted to show you in closing. Another fascinating picture of Hayabusa 2's re-entry over the Australian outback, the red surface, which you can see on the top. And this is a what you call a fish lens photo that was taken, and the what's streaking through the sky, of course, is the Hayabusa 2 capsule. And so I want to thank you for listening to my talks this morning. And I hope I could give you a touch of the exciting future of space exploration. Reality is that humans already have had presence in space for 20 years, that our life increasingly tied to space applications, and with the journey further into space, with many new actors joining in, I think there is much work for us to do to keep a sustainable and safe space environment, and for us to go further out to the moon, Mars, and beyond. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Onoda, for a clear, logical, and visually exciting presentation. Japan oftentimes punch under its weight in the international community, but JAXA and Japan is lucky to have you in Washington. So thank you very much. Minister Nakamura, floor is yours.
Hello, everyone. I'm Kimi Nakamura from the Japanese Embassy in Washington, D.C. Thank you all, Dr. Akimoto and his staff at the Sasaga Peace Foundation, USA, for this great opportunity. As Dr. Akimoto already mentioned, I wear two different hats in Washington, D.C. In addition to my responsibility to work on the congressional affairs, which is very much down the earth issues, I'm doing kind of advocacy on the US-Japan Space Cooperation in close coordination with Dr. Masami Onoda, and together with my colleagues from the Japanese Embassy here. So following Dr. Onoda's presentation, let me share my views, my personal views on how the US-Japan Space Cooperation looks like and how promising it is. But before that, I'd like you to look back at history with me, because that gives us lots of insights. Next, please. This slide shows maps of Japan and New England. Actually, one of the 47 prefectures of Japan, named Aomori, and the state of Maine under sister state relations. The geographical characteristics of both places is quite similar. If you have chances to visit both, you will be amazed by the similarity of the natural beauties. Actually, what connected these two places on the opposite side of the globe was a tragedy of an American ship about 130 years ago. The Chesborough, a cargo ship from the United States, wrecked off the coast of Aomori in 1889. There were 23 crew members on board, but only 4 were rescued. They say a lady of the village brought one of the sailors back to life by warming him with her body. The place in which the ship sank was a small village named Shariki. Since the ship was built in Bath, Maine, the state of Maine, Shariki and Bath became sister cities in 1983. Next year, Aomori and Maine became sisters as well. Today, the US forces at the Shariki are playing an essential role for the sake of the defense of Japan. The US Army deploys a radar capable of tracking ballistic missiles that are heading to Japan. Although the deployment of the radar has nothing to do with the tragedy of 130 years ago, this historical tie shows that we two countries form a kind of a community of common destiny. We proudly host more than 56,000 US service members across Japan, as well as many civilian components, the family of the service members and the civilian components. So we host big community of the Americans in Japan under the security treaty. So it's fair to say that the radar at Shariki is crucial to the security of our two nations. The ballistic missile defense is not space operation per se, of course, but it is closely related to outer space because the capabilities for detecting missiles and tracking space objects are technically similar. Today, Japan is considered NASA's most important space partner according to an academic paper. We owe largely this good reputation to JAXA, but Dr. Onoda is such a humble person that let me show it off instead. Dr. Onoda already mentioned Japan's astronauts as well as remarkable achievements in the field of science and technology. But bilateral cooperation between Washington and Tokyo takes a remarkable shape in the security field as well these days. General Raymond of Space Force also said that Japan is the most important partner. However, the journey has not been so easy. Thank you. This is not well known, but Japan is the fourth country in the world that placed a satellite into Earth orbit successfully. That was in 1970. This is a picture of our first satellite, Osumi. Osumi is the name of the place where it was launched. Next, please. Thank you. Osumi was launched with a solid fuel rockets. Since then, Japan had developed solid fuel rockets rapidly. The current model is Epsilon, which is shown on the right of the slide. Solid fuel rockets are easy to launch, and the lead time you need before launch is much shorter than the case of liquid fuel rockets, because to launch liquid fuel rockets, you need to inject the fuel right before the launch. JAXA achieved an innovation of the launching technologies with Epsilon, with only 8 technicians in the operation room. You can launch it, they say. So they call it mobile control. However, if you want to launch heavy payloads, heavy satellites, the power of solid fuel rockets often doesn't suffice. This is one of the reasons why, since the 70s, Japan began building liquid fuel rockets. In the initial stage, we introduced technologies from the United States, but after the 90s, we built rockets with Japan's independent technologies. Today, our flagship rocket series is H2 and A and B. Its success rate is remarkable, which is 98%, and the on-time rate is also of the top level in the world. Actually, the circumstances around the satellites were different from that of rockets. This is largely due to the tough situation between our two countries in the 80s, during which we had lots of trade frictions. In 1990, we two countries concluded an agreement by which Japan pledged to procure most of the satellites we launch through a competitive bidding system, which is open to other countries, including the United States. Back then, the US-made satellites were far more competitive than Japanese satellites, and it was not surprising that Japanese makers began facing a tough situation in the Japanese market. That being said, Japan's industry kept making satellites for scientific research purposes because they were out of the scope of the agreement with the US. I believe the success of the Hayabusa project Masami mentioned owes that. Looking back all the history I mentioned, it's amazing because in my office at the Japanese embassy, there's a picture that shows some US lawmakers who are smashing down Japan's audio equipments in front of the Capitol Hill in the middle of the trade frictions back then. It's amazing how much things have changed since then. Taking this opportunity, I learned that the Sasagawa Peace Foundation USA was founded in 1990 when the relations between Washington and Tokyo was still fragile. Maybe Mr. Sasagawa would be pleased to see what we are doing today. Sorry, this is a little wordy slide. The history of Japan's space activities for defense purposes is very unique, to say the least. The major spacefaring nations like the United States and Russia, the use of outer space was for defense purposes first. In contrast, until recently, did Japan refrain from using outer space for that purpose? In other words, we came very late in the use of outer space in that field for defense purposes. I believe that all of you know that Japan's constitution imposes strict restriction on the activities of the self-defense forces. For example, until 2015, the self-defense forces were not authorized to exercise the right of collective self-defense at all. Under the Abe administration, the self-defense forces became legally authorized to exercise part of the collective self-defense. In the case of space activities, Japan's Diet used to apply additional restraint on top of the constitutional disciplines. In 1969, so right before the launch of our first satellite, Japan's Diet passed a resolution that required Japan's space activities be conducted solely for peaceful purposes. That term, peaceful purposes, was interpreted as non-military. So because of this restraint, it was very difficult for the self-defense forces to use outer space for their mission. In 1998, though, North Korea launched the T-Podon-1 for the first time, and it flew over Japan territory. By the way, at that time, I was a young officer in charge of Japan's policy regarding the United Nations Security Council, and I was deeply involved in the drafting process of Security Council documents. Back then, Japan was a non-permanent member. Because of this incident, Japan decided to place an information gathering satellite into orbit, but due to the additional restraint I mentioned, it was the Cabinet Office who took the jurisdiction of that satellite, not the Ministry of Defense, although one of the primary objectives of the deployment of the satellite was national security. In 2008, a bipartisan group of Diet members introduced a basic space bill, and it became a law. This is a huge step forward regarding the space policy of Japan. I can't underscore more the significance of this law. As you see in the box below, there are 3 key points. First, the law established the headquarters for space policy. Second, we now have a cabinet minister in charge of the space affairs. The third point is what I want to underscore the most in this context. In short, the Japanese government, including the self-defense forces, became able to use outer space for defense purposes to the same extent as other domains. After the next slide, I will explain what we have done since then. So the first issue I want to touch upon is space debris. I don't think I must elaborate on what the space debris is. It is definitely the most significant threat to the sustainability of outer space. Among various methods to cope with the problems of space debris, one of the most important pillars is called space situational awareness, or SSA. Actually, spacefaring nations have been trying to avoid generating unnecessary new debris by such means as intentionally forcing unfunctional satellites to re-enter the Earth's atmosphere. But there are tons of debris around the Earth already, and the live satellites often have to change their orbits to evacuate. But changing satellites' orbit necessitates precious fuel, and the satellite operators want to avoid such a situation to the extent possible, because for satellite, fuel is almost everything. There is no gas station up there, and the fuel does determine the satellite's life, because without the fuel, you cannot keep your satellites in the right place in orbit. To determine whether or not it is necessary to conduct such a maneuver to evacuate from debris, the most important thing is to determine the exact location of your satellite and the space debris that is approaching to your satellite. So this is because the SSA is vital in securing your space assets. The US is providing the world's finest SSA information services to the satellite operators all over the world. US Force provides that service, and I think all of you should be proud of that. However, to keep tracking space objects accurately, it is important to observe them from many places on the surface of the globe. By coincidence, JAXA has operated observatory facilities in Japan to protect its own satellites. So 6 years ago, we decided to connect Japan's observatory facilities and the US data center so that both sides can improve the accuracy of the tracking capabilities. Next, please. So this is the image of tracking space objects. So there are lots of space objects, debris, etc. Next, please. This is an image of, so this is a wordy slide, but what it says is quite simple. We two countries are closely monitoring some countries' suspicious space activities. The behaviors of those countries in question include chase of US satellites, test of missile targeting satellites, targeting laser against our satellites, and so on. The US defense space strategy clearly states that China and Russia present the greatest strategic threat in this field. Next, please. The US defense strategy underscores the importance of a cooperation with US allies, including us. Also, the new US National Space Strategy, which was released yesterday, also emphasizes the partnership with the allies in the multiple contexts. We, the government of Japan, is in the process of developing our space capabilities exactly in the same direction. This chart tells how our future capabilities of the SSA will look like. This is a little too complicated to explain over the screen, but if I may simplify, this basically says the following. First, currently only JAXA provides SSA data to the US side, but in a few years, the Air Self-Defense Forces will deploy its own radar, and the Self-Defense Forces will provide the US side with its own data, together with the data provided by JAXA. Second, also, the Self-Defense Forces will observe outer space by its own satellites from above. Lastly, in addition, the Self-Defense Forces will gather information from private satellite operators as well. Next, please. In addition, last year, the two governments announced an interesting project. Japan is already operating our global positioning system and will launch in 2023 a new satellite which takes part in that system. Our satellite is going to host a sensor provided by the US side. Obviously, such a sensor is quite a sensitive defense item. And we are very proud that the US government decided to count on our satellite for that purpose. Without mutual trust between the two sides, this kind of cooperation can never be achieved. The development of the role, mission, and capabilities of Japan's Ministry of Defense doesn't stop. They recently established a new squadron specialized in space. They already began recruiting space specialists as well. This slide shows the overall picture of the Ministry of Defense, the future design of space capabilities. I'm afraid it's hard to read, but the contents are not so complicated. In short, Japan will secure the security and the sustainability of outer space by mobilizing a wide variety of satellites, including positioning satellites, early warning satellites, communication, meteorological, imagery, etc. Next, please. Japan Ministry of Defense has taken part in tabletop exercises regarding the defense in outer space, organized by the US Space Command since 2016. More significantly, on the right side of the slide, the Japanese delegation has taken part in the Shriver War Game, in which only 8 countries participate. Although self-defense forces came late in the use of outer space for defense purposes, the cooperation with the US in this field is rapidly growing. In my view, this is largely because of the close partnership with the US forces and long-standing interoperability between the US forces and the Japan self-defense forces. By the way, they say it's not common for a governmental official like me to show off the achievements and the greatness of other agencies. But frankly, I can't stop making a brag of the partnership between our defense agencies. They are really great. Let us look at other aspects as well in terms of the space cooperation between the two sides. There are more cooperative agendas beyond the national security between the two sides. For example, JAXA is operating several imagery satellites, which are equipped with L-band synthetic aperture radar. Like the pictures on this slide, they are good at taking imageries of the forest fire, deforestation. The pictures on the right side of the slide show the forest fire in California. In Washington, D.C., there is bipartisan support to major space projects, but my understanding is that the incoming administration is advocating the importance of the use of outer space to cope with global challenges. Next, please. This slide shows Japan's satellites that observe greenhouse gases from outer space. Again, this is not well known, but Japan is the first country in the world that successfully launched a satellite of this type. These satellites are capable of measuring the concentration of CO2 and methane. There are only 60 observation points on the ground regarding the measurement of those gases, but this satellite series, GOSAT, are able to measure as many as 56,000 points. I understand that there is growing interest in this field in the US. Also, JAXA is providing its imageries and data to the developing countries through the Japan International Cooperation Agency, JICA. In addition to deforestation and global warming, we are assisting several coastal developing countries with imageries and data that help fish farming be more effective. As you know, most developing countries do not have affordable access to this kind of imageries and data. So the cooperation in this way has great benefits for them. Actually, the Japanese government has a cabinet level strategic paper on the use of official development assistance in outer space activities. To my understanding, that is quite a unique case in the world. I mentioned an academic article that said Japan is NASA's most important space partner. These are why the article mentioned. The first point is the technical supremacy. The second refers to our potential cooperation to the Artemis program Masami mentioned. And the last point refers to the US perspectives to offset China's influence. Oh, thank you for listening to my presentation. I hope my presentation helped you grasp better perspectives vis-a-vis the current status of our bilateral cooperation and its potential. Frankly, it was my vocation to draw your attention to the fact that the US-Japan space cooperation is really, really exciting, which I'm also enjoying very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Minister Nakamura, for your comprehensive and thoughtful presentation that covers a wide range of very important areas. It also catered to the interest of experts and non-expert who are attending this event. It also shows Japan as a capable, trusted partner of the United States with regard to space. So thank you very much, Minister Nakamura, and of course, Dr. Onoda, for your presentation. Before I open the floor for Q&As, in my separate life as a businessman, I was involved in a joint venture between a Japanese companies actually, and Hughes Electronics in Los Angeles. And I see some experienced space hand, Ted McFarland, Michael Swick, you know, and just wanted to say thank you. I haven't seen you for a long time, but glad to see you. So I'd like to open the floor for Q&A. As I said, please use raise hand button or use chat function to ask question. If I may, I'd like to use the prerogative of moderator to ask a question. Space programs by nature takes a long time, so you know, it transcends each American administration. But we are having a new administration in Washington, and what do you expect from Biden administration in terms of space in general, and also cooperation between US and Japan? What are the areas that, to you, most hopeful and beneficial areas for both United States and Japan?
I think, well, there's a great bipartisanship in Washington, D.C., not only in the intellectual community, but also in the Congress as well, in terms of the space cooperation, the major space agendas, as well as the importance of the partnership with its allies, including us, Japan. That's why maybe there might be some shift on the focus on specific project, but we are very comfortable with talks with the current U.S. administration, U.S. Congress, the bipartisan people from the various intellectual community, the Congress, in terms of the future cooperation vis-a-vis the U.S.-Japan space cooperation. But obviously, in the coming years, such projects as the Artemis, before that Gateway, and also the space security cooperation, which I mentioned, will be one of the most important cooperative items for both of us.
Thank you. And I want to echo Kimi-san's thoughts, as well as somebody who's been really in the middle of US and international space program coordination. We, as international partners at this moment, are striving to try to bring support to the continuing space program in terms of exploration programs that I just introduced, but not only that, of course, there's a breadth of science programs, and also those that support environmental earth science, space science, all of those. We want to see continued strong support from the coming administration. And Japan, I can say, is most willing to continue what we have been doing. And Japan, JAXA, of course, is strongly pushing forward with our existing programs, and we will continue this. I was heartened very much with yesterday's National Space Council, the accomplishments that has been done in the past administration, passing administration, and the incoming administration. Also, we believe that there will be strong bipartisan support for space activities. As we've been seeing, the society and human life is so tightly tied with space applications that it's indispensable. For something happens in space, we will be very reliant on the space systems in our daily life, and also security. And it's very, very important for this incoming administration, and in cooperation with Japan and other partners, to continue our presence in space, and to continue in various ends of applications to support these efforts. So what I, as a representative here in Washington, D.C., together with all my international, each space agency has representatives here, we are willing to always be here to help the United States colleagues to continue.
Thank you very much. We have a question from Ms. Shita Shanti of SpaceX. Go ahead.
Hi, good morning. Thank you, Dr. Onoda and the Minister, for your wonderful presentation today. I want to pass the hearty congratulations on behalf of SpaceX. Obviously, our partnership has been historic, and we met a number of milestones. I was honored to have been part of the SpaceX team that was actually at the Kennedy Space Center during the launch of Crew 1. It was a tremendous, tremendous event. I wanted to ask about the future of human spaceflight. My responsibility is to actually oversee the growth of human spaceflight sales and programs for SpaceX. As you can imagine, that is an exciting vertical to be leading right now. Hopefully some of you have noticed, even just yesterday, we had a successful hop test of our serial number 8 of our Starship. So we're not just talking about utilizing the Dragon for exploration in lower Earth orbit and the International Space Station. Our goals are farther than we've even seen before. So I'd love to hear some more thoughts from you all as well about what some of those other goals in human spaceflight might be, and really look forward to having offline conversations with you to explore deepening and expanding that partnership in space. Thank you.
Wonderful. Shall I take this one, Akimoto-san?
Sure, go ahead.
Yes. So thank you so much for that comment and the question. I have been to SpaceX in Los Angeles, and quite a long time ago, actually, when things were quite different, but I was so excited to see all the things that were just starting to happen. And now seeing that this is all coming to fruition and still going on, it's really, really exciting. And what excited me in the last 10, 15 years or so, I would say, in my career in space, is that there's so many colleagues in the industry to work with. And I love doing this. And I think it brings more, not just job opportunities, business opportunities, but hope to the young generation that they have so many options now in their career in the future. With that, so as you say, I introduced Noguchi-san's flight to ISS, that's to the low Earth orbit. We are still willing to go on to Moon and beyond, and that we work with the United States and international partners heavily to try to accomplish our sustainable, this time, presence in the outer space farther than low Earth orbit, while we still hope to continue in low Earth orbit as well. And so this time, making this sustainable, I believe that our partnership with the industry is indispensable, and this is the same for Japan. And we are looking at various partnerships to do this. Of course, with SpaceX and many other industry, we continue talking for our opportunities to work together. We are looking at the next year's funding for especially the HLS. We hope the best for that. HLS is the human landing system, sorry for the jargon again, to the moon. And that is one keystone that we are looking at in next year's budget. We are very hopeful that we will continue to work towards the next landing on the moon of the US in a few years, and hopefully to have Japanese astronauts on the moon surface as well in more few years.
Thank you very much. I have a question from Mr. George Neild. Could you speak about Japan's interest in suborbital space flight, including space tourism, scientific research, and point-to-point transportation through space?
Okay, so I guess I'll take this one too.
Yeah, Dr. Onoda, please.
Yes, yes. So, hello, George. Nice to hear from you again. So we are very much interested in suborbital spaceflight and space tourism in Japan as well. In the US, there are many space ports and also ones that are being worked on in other countries as well. Japan also hopes in the near future to be able to operate spaceports. And while this is, strictly speaking, I'm from JAXA, so I'm not supposed to talk for other ministries, although for the whole of Japan, I would love to say that we want to see more industrial, commercial activities in space, commercial space flight, suborbital flights. We are willing to support the government for necessary regulations to make that happen. And I believe that some of those talks are ongoing as we speak in some parts of Japan to enable suborbital flights from Japanese space ports in the future, so airports now. So that also we would love to talk with the US partners for that. We are also cooperating with Japanese companies and Japanese entities that support those companies to make these regulations and standards happen in the next few years, I would say. So there will be at various ends talks, and I am very much also willing to learn from the experience from FAA and the American authorities to how they have made this happen in the past, and to work with the industry and to make all of this happen in Japan.
Thank you very much. Do you have anything to add, Minister Nakamura? No? Okay. I have a question from Mr. Robert Wilson. This is a question about JAXA's potential involvement in missile warning. The new Japan space policy note, the country will study small satellite constellations with infrared sensors for missile warning. JAXA has some experience in this area. Is JAXA involved in this effort?
Good question. We provide technical support to the government. The Ministry of Defense, and the Cabinet Office that headquarters the space strategy will provide us policy guidance on how we would conduct this support for this technical support for making these programs happen in Japan. And we do have, as you say, much technology in satellite development. Of course, we are willing to support whatever programs that will come as in the future. And I think it is we are watching closely the developments here in Japan for resilient space platforms to support missile warning. This is something I want to learn as a Washington representative, and to contribute this when we do have the opportunity to support the government to provide this capability.
Thank you very much. We have a question from Mr. Jim Schuff. Jim, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Sorry about that. Thank you very much for the presentations. I wanted to ask whether or not any US restrictions on export controls or info security or classified technology issues ever become an obstacle to US-Japan space cooperation, especially if we're trying to get into more complex issues going forward. And if so, how and how can we maybe overcome that? Thank you.
Thank you.
May I start?
Please go ahead.
Thank you, Jim. Good to see you again. In terms of the defense cooperation vis-a-vis the defense equipment between the two sides, as you know, we have already established a framework to deal with the information security between the two sides, how to deal with the classified information equipped with the defense items, etc. So that's why I do not think there is hindrance that is not helpful for the furtherance of this US-Japan cooperation in terms of the defense space cooperation in this aspect. But in terms of the export control you mentioned, I'm not familiar with the actual business cooperation to build some equipments like satellites or launch vehicle, etc. So if you, Masami, knows about that, could you kindly add that?
I would add nothing from the standard that most international partners may feel and that's known openly, but I would say in recent years we have had some occasions where export control has made it difficult to develop or export import some of our components. But at those times when we have a deadline, the companies come to us. We have worked with closely with the State Department, and they have been very helpful in pushing those regulations and trying to have the process expedited. So I would say that within the current limitations, the US government has been very, very cooperative, and that we appreciate that very much. Of course, export controls are there because they are necessary, and I believe that if streamlining is needed, that will happen, and that we are very much looking forward to continue working with the authorities for smooth international cooperation.
Thank you. I have a question from Mr. Brandon Curry. Has any part of the Biden transition teams from either NASA or State Department engaged with JAXA or the Japanese embassy? Mr. Curry, do you have any context to this question that may be helpful to speakers to answer?
Oh, I was just curious. They've at least the NASA folks have been kind of making the rounds, and
yeah,
since the vast majority of NASA missions do have some sort of international component, I was just curious if there's been any outreach to any of our international space allies. That's all.
Thank you very much.
Fully understand the context, yes.
Or Dr. Onoda?
Okay, so I'll go first.
Go ahead.
Yeah, many of those on the transition team, NASA transition team, actually I do know in person, and we have had, with some of them, we have had quite close interaction in the past. And so in that sense, I believe they understand very well Japan-US relationship. And other than that, I would just say I'm open and waiting and to support the space program.
I echo Matsumi as well. We do know lots of the people in the space community across the aisle. That's why we could begin interactions with the new team as well, anytime they are ready. But due to the political sensitivity and the political structure right now, we are waiting the right opportunity to begin our specific talks with the people.
Thank you very much. We've been talking about the space as an important security, national security domain. And one word that I haven't heard is China. And they've been very quickly upgrading their space expertise and technologies. We've been talking about the Hayabusa 2, but Chinese are very successful in bringing back a sample from the moon very soon. And they have also shown capability to land the other side of the moon, and that was not an easy thing to do. From the viewpoint of the U.S.-Japan cooperation, what are the areas that two countries can do in terms of not necessarily, antagonizing China or anything, but to deal with their space capability, their national interest in the space?
May I start?
Please go ahead.
Okay. So as Dr. Kimoto mentioned, China has shown a big progress on the space activities, especially in the field of the space, the defense sector, at the fastest speed in the world. Also, that is the case in the security field as well. They are now operating the second largest number of military satellites as well. As many pointed out, they are developing capabilities of anti-satellites. So it is imperative for us to brush up the capabilities to track space objects for ensure the space situational awareness to accurately learn what is happening in the Earth orbit. And also, we are closely following what's happening vis-a-vis the relations between China and other countries, other developing countries. Maybe it is also beneficial for both countries to keep talking about the potential impact of those phenomena all over the world.
Thank you very much. Dr. Onoda, anything to add?
Nothing further to add.
Thank you very much. I would like to ask one last question and then ask speakers to have final words. My last question is to Dr. Onoda. Japan has been having shrinking population, companies, even government, sometimes having difficulty looking for filling the positions with the capable young people. And JAXA, particularly the astronaut applications, indicate that you don't have that problem. Many people want to be astronaut, but the bevy of Japanese astronauts are getting old biologically. where are you in terms of bringing up the next generation of Japanese astronauts at the JAXA?
Akimoto-san, great question. So next year we are opening our next call for a new batch of our I hope, for astronauts. We don't know how many we will select. And this time I hear that we are opening this call because we want many more to apply. Last time actually was 2008. And I remember this, that was like, so more than 10 years ago now. And I vividly remember because I also applied for it. And I sat, somehow I got through the document selection, and I sat for 3 days in Tsukuba Space Station with 200 others, including the 3 astronauts that passed that time, Kanai-san, Yui-san, and Onishi-san, in the same room, although I didn't know that at the time. It was a great experience, and you need your parents' consent and everything to apply. I don't know for this time, but for last time it was like that. So it's quite not an easy thing even to just apply. But I encourage everybody who are eligible, because the process itself is so much. It's an unforgettable experience to apply and just work. Just for the mere 3 days, but for the others that went through even further, for longer, to meet all these people, talk to them, why they want to really go out there and work in space. And it's just a great experience to do that. And I think the hope that it brings is wonderful, even if you don't get that very tiny opportunity there. It's very competitive, of course. You mentioned the astronauts getting old. They are getting mature, not old. And
I said biologically.
Biologically, because I happen to have the pleasure of working with each and every of them, and I think it is a great thing that we have diversity in so the young and the more senior are able to go to space these days, and this is a great thing. So diversity is the other thing I want to point out in the astronauts, of course, and in the space community as a whole, to have this great diversity working together is something I'm very hopeful for. So I do encourage everybody to look out for, watch the next astronaut call from Japan that will happen next year. Apply if you can, think about it if you can, and please support the new generation of astronauts.
Thank you. I see a Japanese astronaut, excellent representative of Japan, and even after they retire as an astronaut, they can play a major role in connecting Japan with the international community. Many of them obviously know United States very well and have very close American friends, and I hope that they will continue to play a role in that respect. If I may, Mr. Noguchi actually played American football at the University of Tokyo. He didn't play through the college because he wanted to be an astronaut, but he goes to the Super Bowl every year, and he's really interested in American culture, American people, and I hope that JAXA will play an important role in that respect, not just space, which is obviously your expertise, but I think there are a lot of areas that JAXA people and ex-JAXA people can play. So I just wanted to thank you for your contribution to US-Japan relationship in general as well. I'd like to invite now Minister Nakamura and Dr. Onoda to have a final words.
Oh,
Minister Nakamura, go ahead.
Thanks for this great opportunity. And as you saw, with the Japanese side, so starting with the JAXA, Ministry of Defense, the Cabinet Affairs Office, Minister of Foreign Affairs, to which I belong, all together. So this is a so-called whole of government approach. And the Swiss community in this town, that in Tokyo, are very small. And everybody knows everyone. So you can count on us, and we are very grateful to keep working on with you. So please know that we are here. Thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you, Dr. Onoda.
Yes, and as you have seen from Nakamura-san's, Kimi-san's very enthusiastic presentation, we have the full support of the Japanese government, and the embassy is great. And I'm so fortunate to be able to work with these colleagues at this time. And it's a very difficult time for all of us. So I want to once again repeat the name of the Crew One, resilience. And even in the changing times with COVID and transition, we will try to be resilient, want to, as international partners, help the United States space program to be sustainable, to continue, and to work with us in the future towards the moon, Mars, and also on Earth.
Thank you very much. This is an excellent session that we have in terms of US-Japan Space Cooperation, as well as the US-Japan relationship in general. Sasakawa Peace Foundation USA, if we could play a small role in bringing people together in the United States and Japan, also provide a platform for people to candidly discuss important issues between the two countries, we would be very happy. There are many events in Washington, and your time is very precious, and I would like to offer my heartfelt thank you to attend this event. You made the event very successful. Thank you very much, and looking forward to seeing you next time. Thank you. Bye-bye. Thank you very much, Minister Nakamura. Thank you.